I arrived with a suitcase that felt heavier than my whole life. It rattled faintly with bottles of cleaner, extra rags, gloves, and one old sweater I always wore when no one was watching. The house loomed ahead, surrounded by trimmed hedges and silence. Not the kind of silence that welcomed rest, but the kind that watched you. The walls were white, blindingly white. No smudge, no dust, no personality. As if someone was erasing every trace of living. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was how cold the doorknob felt when I knocked. When she opened the door, I didn't meet her eyes. I focused on her bare feet on the marble floor, on the faint smear of pale pink polish on her toes. She wore a robe, loosely tied, that moved as if wind passed through it, even though the air inside the house was perfectly still. She gestured for me to come in. I stepped over the threshold and felt something tighten in my throat. Not fear, not exactly. Something more like disorientation, like I had crossed into a space that didn't want me, but wasn't going to let me go either. She walked away slowly, her back turned, and I followed the faint scent of rose and skin-warmed silk that lingered in her wake. She didn't say where to put my things. She didn't ask for anything right away. I took that as permission to begin. I found the closet where the cleaning supplies were neatly labeled, untouched, as if they'd been bought for appearance. I unpacked my own items beside hers, cheaper, more worn, but reliable. I began in the living room, dusting the window frames, wiping the surfaces that didn't need wiping. She reappeared as I was cleaning the glass coffee table. She didn't announce herself. She simply stood there, just outside the frame of my reflection, watching. I kept my eyes on the cloth moving in slow circles, but I could feel her. She sat on the edge of the couch, one leg tucked beneath her, robe parting just enough to expose the smooth curve of her thigh. I could see it even without looking directly. My face burned, but my hands didn't stop. I moved from one room to the next. Bedroom, bathroom, study. Each space was untouched but demanding, like museum exhibits. There was no mess, but somehow the house felt dirtier than most. Because it was lifeless, because it had been curated, because behind the perfection was something hollow. She followed me without following. I would catch the movement of her robe at the edge of my vision, hear the soft click of her nails on her wine glass, or the barely there exhale as she passed behind me. In the kitchen, I scrubbed the stove, even though it was spotless. My reflection in the black surface was sharp, raw. I looked tired already. It wasn't the work. I'd cleaned bigger homes, richer homes, but none of them watched me like this. None of them made me feel like I was breathing someone else's air, like I was inside someone else's dream, one where I didn't belong, but was needed just enough to be tolerated. When I stepped out to clean the pool deck, the sunlight was unforgiving. My shirt clung to my back, sweat pooling between my shoulder blades. She appeared again, barefoot, carrying a glass of something clear and cold. She sat on a chase, her skin glowing from the light, her robe loose enough to suggest but never expose. I bent over the tiles, scrubbing, and I could feel her eyes moving over me. Not like a boss, not like someone checking for streaks or missed corners. It was slower than that, warmer, and it made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't felt in years. I told myself to focus on the grout lines, on the pressure of my hand against the scrubber. But my skin prickled, aware of every inch of my body exposed to her view, the back of my neck, the curve of my waist, the fabric stretching across my thighs. I finished faster than usual and kept my head down as I gathered my supplies. But when I passed by her to return to the house, her legs shifted slightly, parting just a bit. An invitation? A trap? Or just the heat? I didn't know. I didn't look. But the image burned behind my eyes. Inside, the air was cool again, but my body still radiated heat. I went upstairs to the guest room where I'd sleep and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to slow my breathing. My hands were trembling. My thighs ached from kneeling, but it wasn't just that. It was her. The way she moved through her space like it owed her everything. The way she looked at me like I was part of the furniture, and yet not. I had worked in homes where I was invisible. I preferred it that way. But here, I felt seen, and I didn't know yet if that was a gift or a warning. That night, I lay awake for hours. The sheets smelled clean, unused. My body was sore, not from labor, but from tension. I replayed every glance, every accidental brush of air between us, every silence she filled with presence. I tried not to touch myself, but I failed. I did it quietly, slowly, with one hand pressed to my mouth to stifle the sounds. I imagined her lying naked under her silk sheets, her thighs spread, her fingers between them, eyes closed as she whispered my name. But I didn't know her voice yet, so I used my own. When I finished, I didn't feel shame. I felt emptier, as if I had released something I wasn't ready to admit was inside me. I turned on my side and stared into the dark. I thought of her hands, her skin, the robe that never stayed shut. And I knew something had begun, something wrong, something I wouldn't be able to clean away. It began with the subtle rhythm of routine, the way she lounged across the living room sofa while I vacuumed around her bare feet, the way she stretched slowly when I entered, arching her back like a lazy cat, her robe falling open just enough to show the inner curve of her thigh. She never moved, never offered to get out of the way. It was as if her stillness was part of the performance, and I had become the audience, trapped in the soft hush of luxury, in the scent of her skin and linen, and something else I couldn't name. I told myself I was imagining it, but my body responded like it had always known the script. I polished the hardwood floors in silence, each stroke of the rag more mechanical than the last, until the ache in my arms distracted me from the ache between my legs. She sat by the window, reading, always reading. Her hair was twisted up with pins, loose strands falling against her neck. She never looked directly at me, but she didn't need to. Her presence wrapped around me like heat. I would glance up briefly and catch her reflection in the glass, the soft line of her jaw, the hollow of her throat. Sometimes she crossed her legs, and the shift in fabric was enough to stop my breath. I wasn't used to this kind of powerlessness, not in someone else's home, not with someone else's wife. But she wasn't married. She didn't wear rings. She wore her solitude like perfume. She started asking for things she didn't need, a glass of water when she was already holding one, a throw blanket folded on the armchair that she could have reached herself. She would call me, her voice low from another room, and I would come, heart already racing, unsure of what she wanted, but certain it would be nothing and everything at once. I'd hand her the item, and her fingers would graze mine, accidental, effortless, but deliberate. I would return to my tasks, pulse thudding in my ears, and try to focus on folding towels while my thoughts unraveled. When I was in the kitchen, she would sometimes enter without a word. She'd lean against the counter, watching me chop vegetables or wipe the sink. I could feel her eyes on the back of my neck, on the slow bend of my spine as I reached into the lower cabinets. She never spoke, but she was loud in her silence. She made the air buzz with something unnamed, something thick and expectant, and I began to perform for her without meaning to. My movements slower, more graceful. I would roll up my sleeves higher, tie my apron tighter. I started wearing softer fabrics. She noticed. I could tell by the way her gaze lingered when I walked past. One afternoon, I was dusting the bookshelves when she came up behind me. I heard nothing, but I felt her. The warmth of her body close to mine, the scent of her skin. She reached around me to adjust a picture frame on the shelf, unnecessary, perfectly aligned, and her arm brushed my waist. My breath caught. Her skin was cool, smooth, and it pressed into me just long enough to make my knees soften. Then she stepped back, leaving me trembling. I stood there for a full minute, rag in hand, pretending to examine a book spine while I tried to calm the fire in my chest. That night, I stayed longer in the bath than usual. I sat in the quiet water, legs drawn up, forehead resting on my knees, the memory of her touch still pulsing through me like a hidden bruise. I touched myself there too, gently, slowly, as if retracing her fingers. I imagined her watching, not touching, not speaking, just watching with that same unreadable expression she always wore. I didn't finish. I didn't want to. I wanted to keep the ache. She began to test me in other ways. She'd walk through the house in short silk shorts and a tank top without a bra, her nipples visible beneath the fabric, her hips moving with the lazy confidence of someone used to being wanted. She wouldn't look at me when she passed, but I saw the corners of her mouth curve when she caught me staring. I hated that I stared. I hated that I couldn't stop. I told myself it was wrong, but I never felt more alive. Sometimes, when I vacuumed her bedroom, she would undress in the bathroom with the door half open. Not wide enough to show everything, but enough to tempt, enough to haunt. I would catch glimpses, her silhouette behind steamed glass, the outline of her breasts, the shimmer of her wet skin as she toweled off. I told myself to turn away, to finish the job, but I didn't. I lingered. I listened. I burned. At night, when I lay in the guest bed, I could hear her moving upstairs, the soft creak of her floorboards, the click of the bathroom light, the quiet splash of water as she washed her face. I imagined her brushing her teeth, naked, looking at herself in the mirror. I imagined her crawling into bed, alone, pulling the silk sheets over her thighs. My hands would slide beneath my underwear without thinking. I would press my palm between my legs and close my eyes. I tried not to moan. I always failed. Then came the afternoon with the closet. I had finished folding the laundry and brought it to her room. The closet door was ajar. I stepped inside to hang her robe and froze. She had left her lingerie hanging on the hook. Lace, black, nearly transparent. I touched it, barely. The fabric was soft and warm from her skin. I brought it to my face, just for a second, just to feel her. And that's when I saw her in the mirror, standing behind me, watching. She didn't speak. She didn't move. I stood still, shame crashing over me in waves. But she didn't look angry. She looked curious, amused, almost pleased. She stepped forward, slowly, and took the robe from my hand. Our fingers touched again, this time longer, hotter. She held my gaze in the mirror, and for the first time, I didn't look away. I saw myself in her eyes, flushed, breathless, exposed. She turned and walked away, just like that, leaving me alone in the closet, trembling. I sank to my knees, the scent of her still clinging to my fingers, and I knew it was only a matter of time. I had already crossed a line, or maybe, just maybe, she had been drawing that line with her body from the very beginning, waiting for me to step over it willingly. It happened quietly, without ceremony, without warning. She reached out and touched me. Just once. A single grazing touch along the curve of my neck as I was bent over the bathtub, scrubbing tiles that were already pristine. The contact was so light, it could have been dismissed as accidental, but my body registered it like a shock wave. My muscles tensed, my breath hitched, my fingers froze on the sponge. I didn't look up. I couldn't. If I looked at her, something would break open, something I might not be able to close again. After that, everything changed. The dynamic between us shifted, tilted towards something unspeakable. She didn't pretend it hadn't happened. She didn't retreat or apologize. Instead, she leaned into it, into me, into the charged silences and prolonged glances and the deliberate proximity. She started entering rooms more slowly, letting her scent announce her before her presence did. She brushed past me when there was no need to. Her hands grazed my waist when reaching for a wine glass. Her arm brushed my chest when she handed me a folded blanket, and each time, the world narrowed to the size of my skin. My body became a map she touched with intention, even if never openly. She touched the air around me, the possibilities of me, and I responded. I started to wait for it, expect it, crave it. My stomach would flutter when I heard her footsteps behind me. My thighs would press together when I felt the heat of her breath near my ear, even if it was only in passing. I wasn't imagining it anymore. This was a game she was playing, and I had become a willing piece on her board. She began calling for me later in the evenings, after dinner, after her bath, when the house fell into a thick, comfortable silence. She would be in her bedroom, the lights low, the door open just enough. I would come in, wiping my hands on a towel, pretending to still be working. She would ask for a glass of water, a box from the top shelf, a book from the nightstand. Small things, mundane things, but each request pulled me closer to her. I would walk into the soft amber glow of her room, see her reclining on the bed in nothing but a silk slip, and feel my pulse scatter. I tried to keep my eyes down. I failed. One night, she asked me to unzip the back of her dress. It was a ridiculous request. She could have done it herself, but she stood in front of the mirror, waiting. I approached slowly, my fingers trembling before I even touched the zipper. As I slid it down, inch by inch, I watched the fabric part, revealing the smooth line of her spine, the deep hollow at the base of her back, the edge of her underwear. She didn't move. She didn't speak. When I reached the bottom, my fingers brushed her skin. She exhaled, soft and deliberate, and I felt it through my entire body. She turned around. The dress slipped off her shoulders and pulled around her feet. She stepped out of it as if I wasn't even there, but I was. I was there in every fiber of my being, every nerve lit like a fuse. I stood frozen, eyes locked on the curve of her hips, the way the strap of her bra clung to the softness of her chest. She walked to the bed, pulled back the sheet, and lay down. She said nothing, but she didn't close the door. That silence was the loudest invitation I'd ever heard. I left. That time. I walked back to my room, shaking. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall, hands pressed between my knees to keep them from trembling. I wanted her. I wanted her with a hunger that scared me, not just physically. I wanted to be consumed by her, absorbed into the heat of her body, pulled into the gravity of her desire. I had never felt this before, this powerlessness, this obsession. The next night, I didn't wait to be called. I hovered, pretended to be wiping down surfaces that didn't need wiping. She appeared in the hallway in a thin robe, hair still damp, her skin dewy from the shower. She paused in front of me, her eyes searching mine with a calmness that was almost cruel. Then she walked into her room without saying a word, left the door open again. My feet moved before my mind caught up. I stepped inside, my chest tight, my pulse loud in my ears. She was on the bed, Leaning back on one arm, her legs stretched out, the robe already slipping off her shoulder. I stood there, heart pounding, unsure of the rules. But she reached out slowly, took my wrist, and guided me to her. My knees hit the edge of the mattress. I sat beside her, unsure if I was still dreaming. Her hand slid up my thigh. Not fast, not greedy, just certain. She touched me through the fabric of my pants, and my breath caught in my throat. My skin felt too tight for my body. I closed my eyes, afraid of what might spill out of me if I saw her looking at me like that. She leaned forward, her mouth near my neck, her breath warm and steady. She kissed the hollow beneath my ear. My hands gripped the blanket beneath us. My entire body lit up like wire beneath flame. She pulled my shirt up and off with elegant ease. My bra followed. I felt exposed, vulnerable, trembling, but I didn't move to stop her. Her hands were soft but deliberate, gliding across my stomach, cupping my breasts, tracing the arch of my ribs. When her mouth closed around my nipple, I gasped, sharp and sudden, and my spine arched against her. Her tongue moved slowly, then faster, as her hands traveled lower. I didn't know where to put mine. I let them rest on her shoulders, then in her hair, then clutched the back of her neck as she kissed her way down my body. She unfastened my pants and slipped them down, her fingers brushing the inside of my thighs. She kissed the skin there, tenderly, reverently, then moved between my legs with such ease, such knowing, that I forgot how to breathe. Her mouth found me, soft and unrelenting, and when she began to lick, slow at first, then with growing pressure, I dissolved. My hands clutched the sheets, my hips lifted, my moans slipped out before I could trap them. I had never felt this much. I had never lost myself so completely. When it was over, she pulled me up beside her, her arms around me, her lips brushing my temple. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. My body was shaking, my skin slick with sweat, my legs weak. But I had never felt more alive. I curled into her, into the scent of her skin and the softness of her breath, and I knew something inside me had shifted permanently. I had touched something I wouldn't be able to let go of, something dangerous, something sacred, something real. The days after felt like they existed in a different kind of time, slower, heavier, each second stretching like warm honey, clinging to my skin and refusing to let go. I moved through the house as I always had, carrying linens, polishing surfaces, but everything felt altered, saturated with memory. The shape of the bed reminded me of her hands on my waist. The way the sunlight hit the kitchen tiles reminded me of her breath on my thighs. Even the quiet was no longer just silence. It was a charged hum, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. She didn't speak of it. She didn't need to. Her body said everything. The way her fingers brushed mine when I handed her something, the way she looked at me over the rim of her coffee cup, eyes slow and deliberate. The way her bare shoulder peeked out from her robe as she stood in the doorway of her bedroom, watching me as I made the bed we had shared. Nothing was named, but everything had changed. She started leaving her door open more often. I stopped knocking. At night, I would finish cleaning, wash my hands, brush my hair back with trembling fingers, and walk down the hall barefoot, my pulse throbbing in my wrists. Her lamp would already be on, casting warm shadows across the room. She'd be on the bed, or standing by the mirror, or curled on the rug reading a book, the strap of her nightgown sliding down her arm. I'd walk in, and she would glance at me once, just once, and that was all it took. The air would thicken, the space between us would collapse. She liked to undress me slowly. not with clumsy urgency, but with the grace of someone who knew the weight of ritual. Her fingers moved with precision, pulling fabric away from my body like peeling the skin of fruit. She'd tug my shirt up over my head, her knuckles grazing my ribs, and kiss the skin she uncovered. My bra would fall to the floor in silence, and her lips would find the softest parts of me, warming them until I ached. She didn't rush. She mapped me with her mouth, every time, like I was a story she was learning to read by touch alone. I stopped sleeping in my room. There was no need anymore. Her bed became mine, her sheets soaked in our scent. We would fall asleep twisted together, skin on skin, breath on breath. In the early mornings, I'd wake to her fingers trailing up my thigh, to her mouth between my legs before I even opened my eyes. She tasted me like a secret. She devoured me with quiet reverence, and I would give in, every time, melting into her until I forgot where I ended and she began. We didn't speak, not about what we were, not about what it meant, but it filled every moment. The electricity, the hunger, the way my hands found her body in the dark like a prayer. She made me feel worshipped. She made me feel owned. She had rules I was never told, but quickly learned. I was to come when she wanted. I was to stay when she kept me. I was not to initiate. She did, always, and I obeyed without question. There was something intoxicating in the surrender, in the quiet thrill of being chosen. I found comfort in her control, in the way she guided my head down, slipped her fingers into my mouth, spread her legs for me with a look that said, now. I wanted nothing more than to please her. Sometimes she would press me down onto the rug, her knee between my thighs, her mouth hot and urgent. She liked to straddle my face, holding my wrists above my head, rocking slowly against my tongue until she came, her fingers digging crescents into my arms. Other times she was softer, letting me undress her with trembling hands, watching me with half-lidded eyes as I kissed my way down her stomach. I learned every inch of her, the place beneath her navel that made her gasp, the way her thighs trembled when I used my fingers just right, the way she moaned my name like it was a secret she hadn't meant to say. The work still had to be done. The house didn't clean itself. But now everything I touched carried a second meaning. The sheets I washed still held the ghost of her body. The floors I mopped still echoed with the sound of us moving against them. Even her clothes, her silk nightgowns, her lace underwear, her perfume on the collar of her blouse were soaked with memory. I folded them with shaking hands, my breath catching at the thought of her wearing them again, or not wearing them at all. I stopped thinking about right and wrong. I stopped thinking altogether. My world narrowed to the heat of her mouth, the weight of her body, the softness of her thighs pressing against my cheeks. My body moved on instinct. My soul floated somewhere just above us, watching, unable to look away. I was addicted to her. Not just to the pleasure, but to the closeness, the intimacy, the wordless understanding that passed between us when our foreheads touched and our bodies were still humming from the storm. But beneath it all, something else began to stir. Not fear, not yet, but a trembling awareness that I had given myself over completely to someone who never promised to keep me. I was hers now, her possession, her plaything, her indulgence. And while I clung to the illusion of intimacy, I began to wonder if she saw me as anything more than an extension of her desire, something beautiful to fill the hours between nightfall and sunrise. Still, I kept going, kept returning to her bed, kept pressing my lips to her thighs, kept letting her pull my hair back as she came with a shudder and a hiss. I buried every question beneath the sound of her breath. I buried every doubt beneath the taste of her skin. Because in the quiet after, when she wrapped her arms around me and pulled me close, I felt whole. I felt wanted. I felt like I had a place in the world, even if that place was on my knees in the dark. It began to shift so slowly that I almost didn't notice. A hesitation here, a glance that didn't last as long, a night when the door to her room remained shut. The silence between us changed its texture. It no longer buzzed with expectation, but settled into something colder, something vaguely hollow. At first, I thought it was my imagination. I convinced myself she was tired, distracted, lost in her own thoughts. I clung to that belief the way someone clings to a fading scent in a room where someone used to sleep. She stopped reaching for me. I still came to her door, still stood in the dim hallway waiting for that subtle signal, an open door, a sliver of light, a look, but it never came. The warmth I had grown addicted to was gone, replaced by indifference that stung sharper than cruelty. I would pass her in the hallway and feel invisible. She no longer brushed my arm, no longer let her robe slip just enough, no longer summoned me late at night with that quiet, possessive gaze. I was just a body again, a function, a silhouette moving through the corners of her house. In the mornings, I still folded the sheets we once tangled ourselves in. Now they smelled only of detergent. No more sweat, no more perfume, no more of her skin sinking into mine. I lingered at her door sometimes, listening, hoping to hear the rhythm of breath in sleep, a shift of the mattress, the creak of her steps inviting me back in. But there was only silence, a suffocating stillness that pressed against my chest like a weight. The touch that once made my thighs tremble and my heart race now belonged to someone else. I found out by accident, or maybe not. Maybe she wanted me to see. Maybe she meant for the sounds to reach the hallway, to echo off the stone floors and slip beneath the crack in my door. I had been turning down the lights in the living room when I heard the soft laughter, hers and another woman's. I froze, hand still on the switch. The laughter turned to whispers, the whispers into sighs. Then came the unmistakable rhythm of skin against skin, the moans curling through the air like smoke. I stood there, unable to move, every part of me burning. It was the same sound she had made with me, but this time, it wasn't for me. I crept down the hall like a thief, compelled by something dark and fragile. The door was ajar. I didn't need to see much, just enough. Her bare back arched in the candlelight, another body beneath hers, their limbs tangled the way ours used to be, her mouth on someone else's throat, her hands pulling someone else's hips closer. The way she moved, confident, slow, possessive, was the same. But she didn't hesitate, didn't pause, didn't look for me. I backed away, heart hammering so loud I thought it might betray me. I returned to my room, numb. The sheets felt cold against my skin. I lay awake until dawn, arms wrapped around myself like protection, but nothing could shield me from the sudden vacancy in my chest. She had let me fall into her, drown in her, only to leave me gasping in the dark, forgotten. The days that followed felt unfamiliar. I moved through them in a fog, performing my duties with mechanical precision. I didn't speak unless spoken to. I didn't linger in the hallways. I avoided her gaze, though she rarely looked at me now. It was as if she had erased the version of me that once knelt between her legs and replaced it with a stranger who folded towels and swept floors. The contrast was unbearable. But what hurt most wasn't her betrayal. It was my compliance, the way I still longed for her, the way my body still reacted to the sound of her footsteps, the scent of her hair as she passed, the way I still dreamed of her mouth, her hands, the way she used to touch me like I belonged to her. Even now, knowing what I knew, I craved her. That craving became a kind of illness, a festering need that curled inside my stomach like something spoiled and breathing. I tried to reclaim myself. I tried to find the version of me that had existed before her, but I had no map for that. She had erased all the paths back. Everything I touched reminded me of her. The edge of the tub where she once leaned back, head tilted as I bathed her. The rug in the living room where she pinned my wrists and rode me until I cried out. The linen closet where I once hid and touched myself to the sound of her voice. The ghost of her was everywhere. One morning, I found one of her earrings on the floor in the laundry room. Delicate, gold, warm from the dryer. I turned it over in my hand and held it to my cheek. I stood there for a long time, frozen in that humiliating tenderness, until I realized she was watching me from the doorway. She said nothing, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and walked away. She didn't ask for the earring back. That was when I knew she was done. Not angry, not cruel, just finished. As if I had been a season, a passing indulgence, nothing more. She had peeled me off like dead skin, and I let her. I began to fantasize about hurting her, not physically, but emotionally. I wanted her to feel the burn she left behind in me. I wanted her to see herself reflected in my ruin. I thought about quitting. I imagined packing my things in silence, leaving her house scrubbed clean of every trace of me. But then I imagined her not noticing, not caring, and that hurt more than anything else. So I stayed. I worked. I served. But inside me, something began to rot. Something dark and silent and patient. I stopped crying. I stopped dreaming. I stopped waiting for her door to open. I wore gloves even when I didn't need to, just to feel some barrier between my hands and the world. I couldn't touch anything without remembering. So I tried to stop feeling altogether. And still, at night, I lay awake, picturing her with that woman, wondering if she moaned the same way, wondering if she whispered the same words, wondering if I had ever meant anything at all. It didn't feel like a decision. There was no moment where I sat down and weighed right against wrong, no plan carefully crafted in the shadows of my room. It happened the way certain storms do, unseen pressure building over time until the air itself cracks open. I existed in a state of quiet unraveling for so long that when the thread finally snapped, I barely noticed. It was as if something inside me had been quietly waiting for its turn to take over, patient and unblinking. She had become a ghost that haunted every corner of the house, not by absence, but by indifference. Her presence was a dull ache now, not the fever it used to be. She moved past me like I was a lamp, a chair, a doormat. My name no longer crossed her lips. My skin no longer mattered. I still washed her sheets, still cooked her food, still wiped the lipstick stains from her wine glasses, even when I knew they weren't mine, especially when I knew they weren't mine. The shame turned into something else, not numbness, something sharper, a slow, acidic contempt that began to eat at the softness inside me. I watched her laugh into her phone, heard her heels clicking across the floor as she left for dinners that didn't involve me, saw her reflection glide past mine without so much as a blink of recognition. I stopped trying to win her back. That part of me had withered, died, and curled into something dry and unrecognizable. She left town for 3 days, a conference or a retreat, I don't remember. The house was quiet, hollow and filled with her absence like smoke. Her perfume still lingered in the bathroom, her hairbrush still caught strands of her golden hair. I walked into her room, sat on her bed, and just stared at nothing for hours. My hands ran over the sheets, smooth and expensive, and then dug beneath the pillows, searching for something I couldn't name. Her nightgown was folded at the foot of the bed, thin silk, the color of soft cream. I lifted it to my face and inhaled. It didn't smell like her anymore, not really. It smelled like me, like ghosts and sweat and something sickly sweet. I went to the kitchen that night, not to cook, not to clean. I walked barefoot, careful, each step deliberate. I opened the cupboard where she kept her preserves, the one she made herself and handed out at parties as if they were love letters in jars. I picked one at random, something red, peppers maybe, or tomatoes. I unscrewed the lid and placed it on the counter. The metal top clinked softly, like the tiniest confession. I stared at it for a long time. Then I pulled down my underwear and crouched. My hand shook, not from guilt, from clarity. It took less than a minute. I wiped myself clean, closed the jar, screwed the lid on tightly, cleaned the counter, washed my hands twice. I placed the jar back on the shelf. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt still, like the storm had finally passed and left me standing in the eerie calm that comes after everything is broken. She returned 2 days later. The scent of expensive hotel soap clung to her skin. I unpacked her bags, hung her dress, noted the new lingerie she had brought home, black lace, still smelling of someone else. She didn't look at me. She walked past and left the door open. Not for me, just out of habit. I didn't go in. I had no need to anymore. A week later, she hosted a small gathering. A few women, the same ones who always floated through her life like leaves caught in slow-moving water. I set the table, poured wine, placed dishes just so. I moved like a servant, invisible but necessary. My body was a tool, my eyes soft and dull. The women complimented the food, the decor, the little touches. And then she opened the preserves. I heard the seal pop. I heard the spoon clink against the glass. I watched as she scooped it onto toast, smiling. She passed it to her friend, the one with the blonde curls and expensive bracelets. I watched the woman take a bite, chew, swallow, close her eyes as if savoring something divine. They all followed, one by one, spreading it, tasting it, licking their fingers. Compliments rose like bubbles. I stood in the doorway and felt something cold bloom in my chest. Not satisfaction, not revenge, something more complicated, something filthier. The room was filled with laughter, casual and bright, and I stood in the shadows holding an empty tray and knowing something they didn't, something that clung to their teeth and settled in their bellies. She never knew. Or maybe she did. Maybe she caught the flicker in my eyes as I cleared the dishes. Maybe she wondered why I lingered longer than necessary when wiping her fingertips clean with a damp cloth. Maybe she liked not knowing, or knowing just enough to pretend. Either way, she never said a word. I left the next morning, packed my things before sunrise. The house was still asleep. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching nothing, leaving no trace. The jar was gone now, consumed, forgotten, but the taste of it would remain, somewhere, in her, in them, in the echo of what we had been and what I had become. No goodbye, no note, no closure, just the echo of my footsteps down the driveway and the knowledge that sometimes the only way to be remembered is to become unforgettable in the most horrifying way possible.